Hey, Newsa-Cast listeners, you can find every episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Please help us grow by subscribing or sharing the Newsa-Cast with friends, or follow us on Facebook, X, TikTok, or Instagram. Now let's get the show on the road.
And anytime you get slammed on your head, you can pretty much assume that was not according to the plan. So I kind of just roll with the punches, or in that case, rolled with the slam and kept looking for what was next.
Welcome to the Newsa-Cast. What is a Newsa-Cast? It's where we bring local folk stories to life through conversation.
All right, Newsa-Cast listeners, welcome to another exciting episode of the Newsa-Cast. We're just really happy that you continue to tune in and enjoy what we're putting out there for you. We think we have a decent product, and we're getting better all the time, Joe.
Yeah, I would agree, Tosh. We have another good one, a new subject for us, little MMA, little UFC, little wrestling. We talk it all with Kegan Gennrich from, state champion out of Hortonville in 2012, but he's an MMA fighter, and he is literally on the doorstep of UFC. The stuff we see on the cage fighting, the ESPN and Fox Sports and all that, the cage fighting with Kegan, he is right there. He's one of those guys, and it was a fascinating interview, that's for sure. Yeah,
I think our listeners are gonna to learn a little bit, and now you got somebody to pull for too when you're watching those and doing your pay-per-view. So hopefully we get to hear his name announced in the UFC rink in the near future. And, when that happens, we're going to have him back on to talk a little bit about what happened for sure. So, great interview. You're going to enjoy it. But, Joe, I guess we have to talk a little Packers.
Yeah.
People are a little disappointed. But, great season. And it would have been nice to knock off the mighty 49ers. But who would have guessed that the Packers, when they were 2-5, would have even been in that position?
Well, that's true, Tosh. Heck, I even called it. I said the season was over with, and lo and behold, they're 2 weeks into the playoffs. But, with that said, and you look back at history a little bit, son of a gun, Tosh, they had the opportunity. Ifs and buts were candies and nuts, or I don't know, whatever the saying is, the Packers should have won the gosh darn game. They had it won, Tosh, and you don't get these opportunities. Maybe other than Buffalo, is there a team I feel like that just makes the playoffs and just gets gut-wrenching defeats every other year? I mean, you lose an onside kick, you give up a 4th and 26, you're a double-digit, favorite in 8 NFC championships and Super Bowls, and you lose those, and this is just another one of those losses where you had the game won. You should have won that game, and they didn't. So that from that standpoint, it's disappointing. Obviously, Love looks exciting, right? The young team.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
the future is bright, but you got to get them when they're there.
He's going to get paid because his contract is up. So the Packers will be paying him. But, from the other standpoint, good teams find ways to win. And San Francisco found a way to win. They're a good team.
Yeah.
And they've been a good team. They're built to dominate. And the Packers had their chances for sure. But I'm going to be that glass half full. I'm excited for the future. I know it's disappointing for the loss, but I'm excited for the future. And, I was thinking we're going to have 4 or 5 years possibly of trying to figure some things out, but these guys came to play, and they've shown a lot of potential, and hopefully that potential can continue for the next several years.
No, absolutely. I mean, some would say this was a textbook way of rebuilding. I mean, we all kind of thought this was a rebuilding year, and to be able to make it to the playoffs, I mean, that folks, is how you rebuild a rebuild a team. So on to 2024. We'll see who wins the Super Bowl this year. I guess low key, I'm kind of rooting for the Lions. It'd be kind of cool to see them win, and we'll see what the Pack can do next year. I tell you, Tosh,
absolutely.
Another team that's in fuego in this area, and we just talked last week to Appleton North boys basketball coach Chris Collette, had a great conversation with him. Well, his team continued a hot run. They Tuesday night. They went on a 35-15 run. They were down by 9 against Kaukauna. Chris talked about the game, said that was going to be a tough game, and they ended up pulling out an 11-point win on the road, and they had a tight one against Hortonville a couple of nights later where they sank a free throw with no time left on the clock to win that. And it's setting up for the showdown January 30th against Oshkosh North. That's going to be a heck of a rematch. That's going to be a great game.
Yeah, this should be a good game, and it's an exciting team to watch in the area. We got a lot of exciting teams playing some good ball right now. So, you know what? This time of year is a lot of fun because it is down to the nitty gritty, so to speak. We're getting ready for playoff runs. We're getting ready for conference tournaments, and the end of the winter season. You hate to, maybe not hate to say it, but it's coming. It's coming along quick. So, and spring sports will start just in a couple months.
Well, Tosh, after all this ice, bring it on, man. I'm ready for spring. Bring it on. Little March Madness. I know before we hit record tonight, you were talking about not only is basketball, lining up here for the postseason. Hockey is, you guys are getting all seated in playoffs and tournament play starts here within the next week or so in that sport as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Looking at conference tournaments next week, and then we have kind of a week to get a couple more games in, and then it's time for regionals, and that's always an exciting time and heartbreaking as well because it's one and done if your season's over. But that'll be exciting too. We have some good teams in the area who can possibly make some runs to the finals, the state championships as well. So we'll be keeping an eye out on those as well.
No, absolutely. We'll snag some interviews with some of these different sports. But really, Tosh, the most pressing news and an update that I need from you, tough week of weather. How's the ice rink holding up?
The ice rink is all set. It's good to go. Put the final touches on it. We got ice. Even this week with temperatures above freezing, as long as it can get close to freezing or a little below freezing at night, it's solid ice now. We don't have any water underneath. We fixed the snow that was in areas from the heavy snow, but rinks do a kind of interesting thing when they're not totally frozen. All that snow pushes down the ice, the water comes up and slushifies the snow, and it just creates ice. So it's in good shape. We got the netting up. Hopefully the boys will have some time to get out on the rink and maybe hopefully get a little bit of time on it. We'll see.
Now, do you put the skates on? Do you put the skates on, or do you man the fire so everybody stays warm?
I man the fire and have a bourbon in my hand.
Yeah, there you go. That's the way to roll.
Speaking of ice and snow, I got to give shout out to Aaron's over the weekend. They had their big, I can't remember the exact name. It's the King of the Snow.
Yeah.
They had the Fat Tire. They had some skiing. They had, fire pits out there and, a good festival type atmosphere on Sunday.
Yeah.
So if you were out there, it was a fantastic time for that. And if not, you can still make it out to Aaron's Nordic Center to see all the good things that they have to offer out there.
Oh, no, absolutely. Winter's just cranking up, Tosh. We're a week into winter here, it feels like. And hopefully it's nice and quick. Maybe, 6 weeks of winter. Let's do that. Let's go out to Aaron's. Let's snowshoe. Let's cross-country ski. I got the Fat Tire out this week. I did do a lot of that, so that was kind of fun. Only diggered twice this week, Tosh.
Well, I do that on a daily basis. So
yeah. One time I had no idea. Second time I saw it coming. So fun. The life of a biker.
I'd say the roads are probably going to clear up over the next couple days for you. So
yeah,
if you digger now, that's your own fault.
It is. Yes. First time I've diggered, so I blame the ice. But that was tough going. Yeah, the weather's a little bit nicer now. Well, Tosh, I've had a good week. I'm excited for this episode. We've got a little old look at new coming up, and we got a good one for you folks. So like, subscribe, tell a friend, check out the Newsa-Cast, check out our YouTube page, the Newsa-Cast, check out our social media. Lindsay's killing it. She puts out great content almost on a daily basis. So yeah, come along for the ride, right?
All right, Newsa-Cast listeners, welcome to that old look at new, where we take a closer look at the history around us. No matter where that history might be, we always seem to find something that seems to be a little interesting, at least interesting to us. So, Joe, what do you got for an old look at new this week?
Well, Tosh, this came across my desk the other day as I was sitting here, and we all love Spotted Cow, right? I mean, it's a Wisconsin legend at this point, but I didn't realize this. Back in 1845 in New Glarus, long before we knew what Spotted Cow even was, there were Swiss immigrants that lived there, and they were the first immigrants to make cheese in the state of Wisconsin. Back in 1845 in New Glarus, they started making Swiss, well, I would assume Swiss cheese. So they were the first American cheese factory, and it was opened by Chester Hazen in Ladoga in 1864. Today, Wisconsin is a leading cheesemaker state in the Union. And that was, I picked that up from a little flyer called Memorable Wisconsin Events, talking about, just different memorable events. And the leading cheese state was one of them, of course. So, yeah.
Yeah. New Glarus is awesome. If you've never been down there, it's a huge Swiss village, and it's pretty awesome. And, obviously the brewery is really cool as well. Stopping in there and checking things out. But yeah, it's a cool little town. Nice. Yeah. Great place to visit.
Oh, absolutely. So knowing now for Spotted Cow, they first made Swiss cheese back there in 1845, and then that led to the cheese factory shortly after in 1864. There you go. So Tosh, while I enjoy my cheese, what am I going to be listening to from you as an old look at new?
I must be stuck on baseball contracts because I found another one.
Nice.
So we looked at Babe Ruth last week. This week we're going to 1950, January 24th. And a player by the name of Jackie Robinson signed the highest contract in Dodger history at $35,000.
Man. Worth every penny of that, that's for sure. But goodness sakes.
Absolutely. Yeah, 1950, only $35,000. And now the Dodgers signed Ohtani for $700 million.
Does $35,000 even buy you an at-bat?
Not on Ohtani's contract.
Yeah. That's nuts. Maybe one pitch, $35,000 a pitch. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah, somebody did break that down. I can't remember what it is, but it's crazy when you look at those numbers.
Yeah, those numbers are not real. It's not even real. It's fantasy. It's got to be.
And remember, wasn't it? It was last week. Babe Ruth signed a 1-year deal, and I'm totally spacing the year it was, but he signed a 1-year deal for $35,000 as well. But it was back. 20s. I think that was the 20s. Yeah. So, yeah, Dodger. I mean, to think that the Dodgers' highest contract as in 1950 at that time. So. Kind of interesting to see where things have progressed since then. Boy,
skyrocketed, that's for sure. To be a professional athlete. Only in my dreams, Tosh. Only in my dreams.
Absolutely.
Well, another riveting rendition of an old look at new.
Hey, Newsa-Cast listeners, we have a great interview today. We are talking to 2012 state champion Kegan Gennrich, who is also the LFA lightweight champion for MMA. This is a great interview, Joe.
It was, Tosh. Freshly belted lightweight title holder. And we got to see the belt, Tosh. Couldn't physically touch it, but that's the first time I actually saw in person like a heavy, a traditional belt. And Kegan said it was heavy.
Yeah, this is a great story. We talked a lot about his MMA career so far, what he does, how he trains, touched base on youth wrestling, high school wrestling. His dad's the coach at Hortonville. Talked a little bit about that, but what a great young man. And this is a lot of fun. If you don't know a lot about MMA, you're going to get a chance to hear a little bit about it and what it entails. And we're definitely pulling for him here at the Newsa-Cast for sure.
Absolutely, Tosh. Cool as can be. One of the, we've said it before, one of the cool things about the Newsa-Cast is we find really unique people. And who knew that we had an MMA fighter in the Fox Cities and like within sniffing distance of the UFC. I mean, that's big time cage wrestling, the stuff we watch on TV. He's doing it. He's one step. He's right there. He's sniffing the big leagues, and it was really, really cool. And what a great guy right here in Appleton and Hortonville, man, right in our backyard. He was an impressive guy for sure.
Yeah. So we hope you enjoy this. You'll get to hear a little bit about his business as well, training and working with youth wrestlers. So sit back and enjoy, and we hope you enjoy another interview with the Newsa-Cast. Appreciate you coming on. I'm going to be honest. I've heard a ton about you from my son. So I've been hearing for years about how much of a badass you are. So,
oh, that's awesome. Thank you very much.
So it was when he mentioned that you just won the title, he's like, you should have him on the podcast. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And
that's super cool. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, this is super exciting. So
it's a pleasure to meet you. I was hoping to see the belt, man. Where is that?
I'll go grab it. I'll be right back.
All right.
All right. I'll hold it up for a little bit. It's surprisingly heavy, though. My dad had to hold my grandma up so she could hold it.
That's so awesome. I know we're an audio podcast, so for the listeners, Kegan has his belt, heavy belt. It's sweet, man. That is awesome. Covers the whole entire chest. You look like Iron Man.
And I get to keep it. I don't have to give it back, so.
That's awesome.
Put it in a trophy case and hang it up somewhere.
That's awesome.
Now, did I hear, I have to apologize, I don't know much about the fight game. I've always enjoyed like boxing. That's sort of what I grew up on. Obviously being from here, we're more football guys, but I sat down this afternoon and just watched a whole bunch of your fights and really got into it and really honestly enjoyed it. Now, did I hear this right? You received your black belt as well the night that you won the championship?
Yeah, I got my black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on right after in the cage after the fight from my head coach, which made it even a little bit more special of a night.
That awesome. Had to be. How long does that take the process to get there? How many years has that taken you to get to that stage?
Typically, they say it's about a 10-year process. So I've been doing like the submission grappling, the Jiu-Jitsu for about 10 or 11 years now. But also wrestling for about 25 or 26 years now. So it's really kind of been a lifetime on the mat.
Oh, it really has. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, I think right off the bat, dude, how do you take blows to the head? I mean, you constantly get beat up. What is your life like? How do you take that? How does that's just life, I guess, right?
Yeah, and in training we hit each other, but we hit each other not trying to hurt each other. So, in training, in the fight it's different. It's some more serious consequences. So, but it's not like I'm fighting every day. If my partner hits me in training or sparring, he's trying to hit me, but he's not trying to break my nose, if that makes sense. So,
absolutely.
It's a rough sport, and I'm sore on a pretty regular basis through training camp, but we try to keep ourselves healthy and concussion-less during training camp. So the fights are obviously a little bit more serious of a deal. And how do you take those blows? I think you'll hear people talk about how if you're in better shape, like cardiovascular wise, if you're in better conditioned, you can typically hold up to more of those blows throughout the fight. That and when you see the kick come in or the punch come in, you can brace for it a little bit more. The ones they'd say you get knocked out by the punches and kicks that you don't see, the ones that kind of surprise you.
I would imagine. How
long do you train for a single fight?
So training is really what I like to do, and I'm teaching and coaching on a daily basis, so I don't ever take too long of a break from being in the gym and training. But when I have a fight scheduled, I would like to have 8 weeks where I have it planned out specifically. I'm going to do this workout on this day in the morning and this workout in the evening. So about eight weeks, 6 to 8 weeks of a scheduled specific, we call it a training camp.
Okay.
How many hours a day is that? So a typical training camp, are you up at 5 a.m.?
So if I'm in training camp, I'll usually do a morning workout and an afternoon workout 6 days a week. So 2 days, 6 days a week. And then the 7th day is like an active recovery day, where I'm not necessarily just sitting around doing nothing, but I wouldn't call it a workout. Like maybe I'll go ride my bike for 30 minutes or go for a light run. So I'm doing something just about every day, 2 days, 6 days a week, and then an active recovery day. So I would say about 2 90-minute sessions usually a day.
Got it. What kind of bike do you ride?
I have a Specialized, more of a cross trainer, and then I have a Trek road bike.
Yeah,
I do
nice.
I do triathlons in the summer too.
Good for you.
So I have a decent little bike, yeah.
I always joke with people. It's become a joke on this podcast. I haven't put a tank of gas in my car yet in 2023. Ride my bike everywhere.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to kind of backtrack for a bit. So I want to talk about your youth. When did you start wrestling? What drew you into wrestling?
So my dad is a former wrestler and wrestling coach. My dad has been the wrestling coach in Hortonville for, like between over 20 years now.
Wow.
Probably closer to 25 years. So I really grew up around it. So I started, we'll say I started wrestling at like 4 or 5 in like the youth club about as soon as I could.
Okay.
And did that for a couple of years. And then I would say as I got to be more like 9, 10, 11, 12, I realized it was something that I was really, really passionate about, and, set the goal of wanting to be a state champion someday. And I think, in about like 4th or 5th grade, I actually started doing the varsity practices up in Hortonville.
Wow.
So I think that toughened me up at a pretty young age, taking my lumps there. But it gave me some people to look. My dad had a state champ in Hortonville when I was about in 6th or 7th grade, and that gave me something to look up to and aspire to. So started like I would say about 12, I got pretty serious about wanting to be a state champion and wrestling in college and stuff like that, and I've been taking it pretty seriously ever since.
Is wrestling the only sport you did in like middle school and high school, or did you do multiple?
I played multiple sports. I wrestled, played football, and I wrestled and played football all 4 years of high school, and I played baseball my freshman year.
All right.
And figured out pretty quickly that wasn't going to be my sport. After my freshman year, I hit about 198 playing freshman ball. But I was the varsity quarterback in Hortonville my junior and senior year, so
That's
I had
awesome.
a lot of fun doing that as well.
Hortonville's athletic facilities are pretty sweet these days. Nice football stadium.
Man, things have really changed a lot since I've been there. Things started to get a little bit nicer as I was getting towards the end of my high school career. But it's really night and day. So my dad is still the coach there. So I go and do a lot of my strength and conditioning out in their facilities. So it's pretty cool that I didn't get to take advantage of it then, but I am now.
What does your dad think of your career? He's got to be proud.
Yeah, he's really proud. And it's cool how much extra time I get to spend with my dad. And also my youngest brother, Kelly, the middle brother, trains with me and is one of my trainers and training partners. So the fact that I get to see my dad a couple times a week and spend time with him was something that we've been doing together for a long time, means a lot. And me and Kelly get to train together 4, 5, 6 days a week. So it's been really special to have my loved ones along on this ride as well.
That's great. Cool. I love to hear that.
And who better to like motivate me than my dad? Like I'm not
That's
like
right.
If my dad comes in to run a workout, he knows what I'm capable of first off. So he knows if I'm slacking, and I'm not, like you can't slack off in front of your dad. You don't want to get beat up in front of your dad or
That's
your mom.
right.
So it's good motivation.
That's right. The honesty of a dad. There's nothing better. So when you're in Hortonville High School, 2012, you win the state championship. But did you realize that MMA was maybe a possibility for you in the future? Was that ever a consideration at that age?
I would say I was a fan of MMA. Growing up, as I got into middle school and high school, there's some fighters I started to like to watch. Anderson Silva was really huge at this time, so he was an exciting fan favorite that I liked watching. I was really focused on being a wrestler. I thought I would go. I got a scholarship to the University of Wisconsin, so I went and wrestled for the Badgers for a year. And really, my plans were to wrestle and then go from there. I ended up leaving school after my freshman year. And growing up, I thought I would always be a professional athlete of some sort, whether that was, football or wrestling, and then coaching wrestling. So when I quit wrestling and dropped out of school, I was feeling like I really had a lot of athletic potential that I didn't want to waste. And I'd already put so much time into wrestling and building up that skill that MMA seemed like I always thought I would be good at it. With my build and, just kind of my physical appearance, maybe looking at me, I don't look like your typical MMA fighter. I'm a little bit skinny,
right?
A little bit reserved. So I kind of had a chip on my shoulder. I think maybe people thought that I wouldn't be very good at it. And, I thought I would. So, after I quit wrestling and left school, I thought would maybe be something that I could make a better lifestyle for myself or make a career out of.
Sure.
I thought it would, and it ended up being a great idea because I get to do what I love every day, and I'm a business owner now. Own the gym I train at with some of my partners, so it ended up being a good decision on my part, I think.
Absolutely. It's an incredible story. We love that. Going back to your build, kind of that long and lean, and it's one of the things I noticed in watching some of your YouTube clips today is that must be an asset for you, right? You kind of your build, sort of throw guys, kind of surprise guys, maybe in the cage a little bit, maybe not expecting some of your moves. I think you probably are a different fighter than what most people are used to.
I do have a little bit longer frame than most people in the 155-pound division, so I would say it's an advantage if you know how to use it. I think the cool thing about wrestling and combat sports is any body shape, any body frame can find success. You find short, stocky, successful fighters. You see taller, lankier fighters. It's just kind of how you build your skill set, around what you have to work. So I would say I am able to use it as an advantage, but I don't think it just is an automatic advantage. I think you have to know how to use the certain skills and skill sets that come with the different body types.
One of the most impressive matches I saw. So you were coming off of a 4-year break, it sounded like, and you were against Devin Bankston in your first match back. Yep. And he slams you. I thought you were going to be out. I mean, he slams you, and within a second, the match is over. You have him in an arm bar, and I don't even know. I slowed that thing down. I still couldn't figure out what the hell happened, but just an incredible move, and it was amazing. I mean, you're known for your arm bar, but what an incredible match to come back after 4 years off. I mean, that had to just be insane for you.
Yeah, that was a little bit sketchy. That was not the plan. Anytime get slammed on your head, you can pretty much assume that was not according to the plan. But with my style, I feel pretty comfortable, whether it's standing, whether it's on the ground. So I think one of my assets one of my advantages or attributes is that I can kind of take the fight as it comes to me and be pretty comfortable everywhere. So I kind of just roll with the punches, or in that case, rolled with the slam and just kept looking for what was next, and it ended up being a pretty sweet little highlight. And to come back and make that submission win happen, I had been out with a couple knee injuries, had some fights fall through. So yeah, that was a pretty cool one. I know I scared the crap out of every single person that was there rooting for me. So I try to avoid doing that again.
Oh, I would imagine. I was stunned too. I mean, Bankston only being a 5'6" guy, I certainly know that feeling. On a good day, I'm 5'6", so the height difference was just was nuts. I really enjoyed that fight a lot.
To talk a little bit about your style, you've talked about your style a little bit. Obviously, you take some from wrestling, you take some from the jiu-jitsu that you just got your black belt in. How do you mold those two styles, and what's your favorite position to be in?
So a lot of times with my wrestling background, people address me in the fight world as a wrestler, Kegan the wrestler, and so on and so forth. And I try not to get, and I don't take offense because I know they mean well, but I really think my strength as an MMA fighter is that I've built an all-around game. My wrestling is really strong, but my striking and my jiu-jitsu are strong as well. So when people say, hey, you're an amazing wrestler, I'm like, thank you, but I think I'm better at MMA as a whole. So I think that's really my strength, is to put it all. I think I'm not the best wrestler. I'm not the best striker. I'm not the best at jiu-jitsu, but I think when it all gets combined together, I think I'm pretty good at MMA as a whole. So my strategy in fights a lot of times is to use that to my advantage. Is if I'm fighting a wrestler, I'll try to be the better striker. If I'm fighting the better striker, a lot of times I can be the better grappler. So I try to use that to find where my opponent might have a weakness and try to exploit that part of their game.
Do you watch a lot of film before the fight? Is that part of your pre-fight routine?
So the league that I've been fighting in, LFA, I've been with for 2 or 3 or 4 years now, and ever since I've been with them, I've kept a fairly close eye on the competition, who's winning, who's on a winning streak, who might I see in the near future. So I kind of keep my eye on the competition in general, but then as far as specifically watching film for a specific fighter, I think other fighters and other coaches probably watch a little bit more film and look for specific things as I do. I'll watch a couple fights kind of just once over to see kind of in general what some of their strengths and weaknesses are. But I don't emphasize watching film, I guess, as much as others, because I know between every fight how much better I've gotten and how many other tricks I've added between fights. You can pretty much guarantee watching that fight from 6 months ago that he's added something to his game, or the weaknesses that were in his game he's been working on fixing. And a lot of fighters maybe have a little bit more specific game plan. I'm going to do this and this and this and this. And I try to have just a little bit more open-minded approach to it and kind of take what's there. So I do watch a little bit film, so I know a little bit to expect, but I don't focus on the specifics maybe as much as others.
Sure. So you're basically bringing your game to the cage and letting them react to it more or less. Just
right. I don't want to wait around to find out what your strengths are. Especially in a fight, I want to get to my strengths and my position. So I really am worried more about what I'm going to do to him than what he's going to do to me.
Right. How much time do you spend on cardio? I can't even imagine how. I mean, I love going to his gym as much as anybody. And when I ever hit the heavy bag, which isn't often, I'm dead after like 30 seconds. I can't imagine how much cardio you guys do.
Yeah, I would say that's probably the thing that people underestimate the most that have never done MMA is how tiring it is. Wrestling is known to be really tiring, and boxing is obviously really tiring as well. But when you combine all of those things together and you got to wrestle and then you got to strike, it is a pretty heavy cardiovascular sport. So I would say in training camp, outside of like my sparring or my wrestling practices, which are obviously improving my cardio as well, I'll do two or three at least different sessions of strength and conditioning. So on Sundays, my dad comes to my gym and we do like circuit work, like hit, I think is the term that most people use. Sure. Like circuits, like 1 minute of this exercise, 1 minute of this exercise. And we do it for 5 minutes. We do 5 rounds, 5 minutes to replicate the fight, 5-minute rounds, 1 minute break in between. And then, like I said, I do like some of my hobbies are doing cardio too, like triathlons are something that I do for fun outside of fighting. So I love to run. I love to ride my bike. So just kind of outside of training, even I'm doing a little bit of that just for fun. Me and Quinn did a 5K this summer before one of my last fights, and that was a good time. So I do a couple extra days or extra workouts a week of specific. I'll ride the assault bike, or the Aerodyne bike is what we used to call it, with the arms and the legs.
Yeah.
So, but I also try not to get too out of shape in between fights. So rather than like get in really good shape and then lose it all and have to build it back, I think I've done a good job of keeping a pretty steady base, so I don't have to build from scratch every time. We can kind of add on to the cardio base I already have. So
as you now Tosh and I are certainly a lot older than you, and it doesn't get easier, year after year. How does it feel now as you hit your 30s? Is it tougher, easier, the same? How you feeling?
Well, you can be super dramatic about it now that I'm 30, so I can complain about it a lot more. I kind of joke. On my 30th birthday, I woke up like with the worst cold I had all year. I'm like, oh, this is your 30s, huh? This is exactly what I heard about being 30.
Wait till you hit 50.
Yeah. I think I want to fight. I don't want to fight until I'm like 35, 40 years old. I'm going to fight really hard I want to be done by I'm about 32. So I got a couple more good years in me, hopefully. I think that I don't drink alcohol at all. I think that gives me a leg up on my peers already, as far as recovery and staying in shape and feeling good goes. So I think that's one advantage I have. But it's getting a little bit harder. I think I have to train a little bit. I think I'm getting smarter too. So it's getting a little bit harder, but I'm getting a little bit smarter on days where I'm feeling super worn down and like maybe I'm overtraining and about to get sick or hurt. I'll allow myself to back off the throttle a little bit and just trying to be a little bit smarter. I heard if you're familiar with Khabib Nurmagomedov, who's arguably the greatest of all time in our sport, 29-0, he says, in your late 20s, you're in your physical peak maybe at 28, but your mental game is not at your peak. And then you turn 30 and your physical peak and your mental game are pretty even. So he says 30 is about your prime for MMA because your mind, your mental game, and your physical body are pretty close to being in their prime. And then he says you get to be about 32 and now your mental game is really strong, but your physical game is starting to slide off. So right now, I really do think I'm right about in my prime for MMA. They say between 30 and 32 are about the best years you have.
Nice. We don't think about this a lot. You think about all the physical, but that mental that's equally as important, isn't it? The mental part of the game.
Yeah, and I think an advantage I've had the last couple of years is I've been able to fight on a pretty regular schedule. Been in training camp or getting ready for fights on a pretty regular basis, and it's amazing how much you learn just in every training camp and every fight. There's valuable lessons to take away from every training camp and every fight. So I really feel like just kind of hitting my peak, and it's nice to have this winning streak going, and I can take a lot of confidence in my training because it's been working and working over and over again. So I have a journal where I journal what I'm eating, what workouts I'm doing, and it's been a winning recipe now for a couple years. So I just take a lot of confidence in trying to repeat a lot of things we did, and then fix some of the things that need fixing, and adding on to what we're already doing. But I try to follow a pretty strict routine of what's been working recently, and that gives me a lot of confidence.
Sure.
So just to maybe tell the listeners a little bit. So how does that work? How do you get your fights? And who does that scheduling and stuff for you, or are you actively doing that yourself?
Okay, so there's a couple different ways it goes. I recently signed to a sports agency, Iridium Sports Agency out of Las Vegas, who has a huge roster of UFC fighters and fighters close to getting into the UFC. So now they do that for me. The fight promoter. The last couple of years, LFA, the organization would contact my agent and say, hey, we have this fight What do you guys think? And they send it over to me to agree to it or not.
Okay.
And the advantage of having and I just recently got with an agency. So there, there's pros and cons. Pros is you have someone in your corner who is actively looking for a good fight for you. And a good fight for you, I mean by that is, so if you don't have an agency, what you run into is promoters bringing you in to fight their guy, right? Okay. They have a guy that they want to promote and see rise to the top. And then they're looking for another guy who they think that might be a little bit more of a favorable matchup for them, right? So without an agent and someone going to bat for you, you're kind of at the will of the promoter reaching out to you, and you kind of got to take what opportunities are there for you. So me as a pro early on, I didn't have an agent. I took a couple losses early on, so I kind of got behind the 8 ball. I wasn't necessarily someone considered a prospect, so I was kind of being brought in to fight these prospects. So that's where you saw me fight guys that are 5 or 6-0, and I didn't really have the option to not take that. So pros, you beat that guy, and now you take his spot, and now you have the momentum, and you're headed towards the top, which is kind of where I'm at now. Whereas if you would get an agent 2 or 3 fights into your pro career, kind of like in boxing, where you see the guys get built up, right? You want to get to be 7, 8, 9, 10-0. That's what the UFC is looking for. And I didn't go that route at first, and I kind of had to take the hard route, and I am proud of that. But I am happy to have an agent now. So they take 20% of my purse, but they also are getting me better contracts. And when the UFC calls, that'll be who they'll call.
Okay.
Do you so when you get a fight, do you get guaranteed money, or is it just strictly a purse, or how you're heading out to California to fight? I guess, how does that work for you logistically, getting out there? Is that on your dime?
So the way that MMA contracts work almost 100% of the time is you have a guaranteed amount of money that you're going to make to make weight and show up and do the fight. And then when you win, it doubles. So most of my contracts would look like, I'll just throw a random number out there, $5,000 to show up and $5,000 more if you win.
Okay.
So if I show up and I don't win, I make $5,000. If I show up and I win, I make $10,000. So there's a lot on the line. Really, essentially half of your payday or your living, whether you win or lose. And then as far as getting to the fights, if you're in driving range, they'll give you gas money, whatever that would mean. But if I'm going to California or I'm going to New York or South Dakota, then they're flying me in a corner out, and that would be on their dime.
Sure.
And then they put you up in the hotel for a couple of days on their dime as well. So I make about half of my living off of my fight purse, and then I also have some really, really supportive sponsors. Okay. So that my purse and then is about half of what I make, and then about double what I make off of sponsors. And those are coming, usually get those at the starting training camp. So those are going towards if I have to get pre-fight medical, to fight, I have to go through some certain licensing, right? I got to get a physical, and I got to get my eyes checked, and I got to do blood work. So sponsors are helping with stuff like that. And then they're also helping me travel. I go to Milwaukee and spend some weekends training there during training camp. Or I made some cross-country trips to other gyms. So sponsors are helping out with that. And then as the fight gets closer, I don't have to be coaching or working quite as much. I can take some more time off of work with their support and just focus on training and resting.
Sure. All right. What does what's the day of a fight look like for you? Maybe the night before meal leading into that day and finally walking into the ring. So for the little bit or a big difference between wrestling and fighting. In wrestling, you weigh in pretty much right before you go to wrestle. You would weigh in that evening and then go wrestle about an hour later. In MMA, you weigh in a full 24 hours before. So if I fight on a Friday, we'll have weigh-ins on Thursday. And then we'll weigh in, and then I'll have media obligations. I'll meet with the commentary team for a pre-fight meeting so they can have some talking points and ask some questions and
have some things to talk about on the commentary, and then you do some other media. I'll take pictures and some short video clips, so they have stuff to use on the TV broadcast of the fights. And then so just a lot of rehydrating and some eating. I'll eat a big meal Thursday. Try to get a good night's sleep. I usually sleep okay the night before a fight. The night before weigh-ins is kind of hard because you're thirsty and you're hungry, and it's hard to fall asleep. Then so I end up, by the end of the weekend, I end up being pretty worn out and tired, and I need about a week to catch up on sleep and laying low. But fight day, I usually ate quite a bit the night before, so around noon on fight day, I'll do I won't even call it a workout, but I'll get up and stretch and move around, think about the fight a little bit, just to kind of move that food around, and be feeling a little bit more fresh. Then I'll take a nap. I really lay pretty low, all the way up until the fight. I always joke, my last few fights have been at Mystic Lake Casino, in Minnesota, which is a really nice hotel. And I'm like, I had a really relaxing trip until I had to fight someone at the end. Because really, I don't have cable TV, so I take advantage of the cable TV at the hotel and watch the Food Network and stuff like that. So I really lay pretty low until fight night. And then this last one, I was the main event, so I didn't fight till about 10 o'clock.
Wow.
So if you would be all worked up and intense all day, it would be really tiring and draining, and you'd probably be pretty pooped by the time the fight came around. So I really try to relax and lay low. And maybe about an hour before the fight, I'll start warming up and getting my hands wrapped and getting my game face on. But other than that, try to save as much energy as I can throughout the day.
So you mentioned the fact that, that Wednesday, say you mentioned the night before you're hungry, you're thirsty. So what is your, how much weight are you cutting up to weigh-in, and how much are you putting back on before the fight?
Okay, so I fight at 155 pounds. And when weigh-ins are on Thursday at about noon. So I'll cut my weight Wednesday night. Okay. And then Thursday morning, I don't have much to do besides wait for the weigh-ins. But the last couple times, I'll cut about 9 pounds in about an hour. Would be the last little bit of my weight cut. And that sounds like a big number, and it is a little bit. But I've been doing it now for so many years that I have all the numbers I need to hit, like days or maybe weeks out. So I know if I weigh 169 12 days before the fight, then I'm right on track to where I need to be. So I'm kind of hitting these little mini goals on the way down, and I know if I'm at a certain weight at a certain time that I'm on track to be where I need to be. So I cut about 9 pounds in an hour. I'll use if you're familiar with what a sauna suit or a rubber suit might be, underneath my clothes. And then what's nice about Mystic Lake is they have a really nice sauna on the grounds there, which not a lot of the hotels that we get put up in as fighters do. So that's kind of been a luxury to have a sauna to sit in. So really I make it pretty routinely. It doesn't take a huge toll on me.
Okay.
I think the more professional about it you can be, the less of a havoc it wreaks on your body. And I think that pays some dividends for me the next night. And then to answer the last part of that question, I was 172 on fight night.
Wow. So is that quote water weight that you're playing with?
It's a lot of water weight. What we do is we manipulate our intake of water. They call it water loading in our sport. So in the weeks leading up to the fight, I'm drinking almost 2 gallons of water a day. So I'm almost overhydrated. So when I go cut that, it's all water weight. I use my diet, my healthy diet, cutting out whatever kind of diet, to get down to a certain weight, 168 or whatever it is, and then the rest of it is water weight, which I've loaded up in my body for in the weeks leading up to the fight. And then a lot of that weight going back in is water weight. I'll make weight, and then I'll drink a whole gallon, 8 pounds of water before I even start eating. So it is a lot of water weight.
So how the heck, it sounds so simple to drink water, but to drink that much water, how the hell do you drink that much water?
It sucks. I haven't drank any water since my fight. I get so sick of it.
Oh my God.
But I guess if you think about working out twice a day, even if you were trying to just stay regularly hydrated, you got to drink water anyway. So, if I work out and now I'm really thirsty, it's not too much to drink, 4 pounds of water or whatever it might be. So it gets old and it gets boring and I get sick of, I carry a gallon around with me everywhere I go for a while. So it's not fun. And I take a break from the water for a little bit afterwards, but it's just part of it. But it's not so bad. And especially in the summer, it was a little bit harder in the winter this time because I'm not sweating as much as I would be in the summer. But in my summer workouts, I'll lose 8 to 10 pounds in an hour and a half of working out. So that's a lot of water just to drink, just to catch back up and be healthy. So it's doable.
Sure. So you have the water, but what do you like to eat? What are you eating? Obviously protein, I'm assuming, but
I do I do what people would call a 1 meal a day, an OMAD diet, when I'm in training camp and trying to make weight. So I'll eat one big meal at the end of the day. I like to train. I don't like to have a full stomach when I train. So to wake up and eat breakfast and then go train really isn't my jive. So I'll do a lot of fasting throughout the day. I'll eat a big meal at like 8 o'clock. And for me, I really like that because I like to eat. I'm kind of like a fat kid at heart. Yeah. So if I eat three small meals throughout the day and never feel like I got full, like that kind of just feels like you're on a diet all the time, and I don't like it. But rather if I can wait till the end of the day and now I'm eating almost as much as I can possibly, stomach and go to bed feeling full and like I had a nice huge meal, that works out a lot better for me. But as far as foods I'm eating, I typically kind of like drift towards a couple things during training camp and end up eating them over and over and over again. And sometimes I end up burning myself out on things, but steak and eggs, chicken and rice and veggie, stir fries. I like breakfast for dinner. So I'll do like banana pancakes, oatmeal. But for most of training camp, I'm still eating probably like 2,800, 3,000 calories a day. And then towards the end, it gets a little bit skimpier, but I didn't skip a meal really all the way up until weigh-ins. I was able to eat all the way up until right about that last day. Gets a little bit skimpier, but
not to jump ahead, but do you know when your next fight's going to be yet, or are you still kind of waiting that game out right now?
That's the tricky part about our sport, and kind of especially where I'm at. I have an idea of a couple of different situations. Okay. That can and will happen. So best case scenario is these days to get signed to the UFC, you would have to maybe be for the UFC to just directly call you out of nowhere and offer you a contract. You would have to be like, I don't know, maybe like have some sort of fame from a different combat sport, or really be a hot if Terrence Crawford wanted to get into MMA, he could probably get a call straight from the UFC. Okay. But a guy like me, I have to essentially wait for someone to get hurt. So let's say there's a UFC fight in 4 weeks at my division. Someone blows their knee out, can't fight. They're going to call me and say, hey, would you take this fight on 3 weeks notice? We know it's short notice, which is a disadvantage to you. But if you do this, we will give you a 3 to 4 fight contract with the UFC to make it worth it on your end. So essentially, I am waiting for that call. I'm waiting for someone to have to pull out on 3 or 4 weeks notice. What's tough about that is I have to essentially stay in training camp and stay within reaching distance of my weight for the time being, which is kind of how I've been going about. I've kind of been in this spot now for the last couple of years where that call might be coming. Okay. It might not be. I'm staying ready for whatever's next. But really, now that I won the belt, the worst case scenario is that I go back and defend that championship in LFA, which would be pretty sweet as well, but it's not the UFC and it's not as lucrative as fighting in the UFC, even in my debut would be. So really, what I'm hoping for is a call from the UFC in the next 3 to 4 to 6 months. If not, we'll look at lining up another title fight with LFA. But with being the champion in LFA, we have something called a champions clause in my contract. So while I'm the champ in LFA, I can either fight in LFA or I could fight in UFC.
Okay.
But I'm not technically a free agent. If Bellator or One Fighting Championships or someone called and wanted me to come fight for them, I would be locked in to my champions contract. So it's either the UFC or bust right now, honestly.
Okay.
Wow. Oh, yeah, we can't wait to watch that unfold. I wanted to circle back a little bit to high school and in particular your state championship in 2012. Can you speak about what it was like to be in the field house and wrestling for a Wisconsin state championship? I mean, can't be a whole lot better than that, really. That had to be quite the experience.
Me and my dad had an interesting conversation about what was cooler, winning state or winning this MMA championship. And I don't know if I've quite decided yet, but they actually hold the state championships in the Cole Center. And they sell out. So at 18 years old, I wrestled in front of 15,000, 16,000 people.
Wow.
So I think that experience has served me well going into fighting, where, maybe at the start you're only fighting in front of a few hundred people. So maybe it doesn't seem like, I think being able to handle that pressure that night at state has definitely helped develop my mental game. And I think one of my strengths as a fighter is I keep my cool under pressure, and I think I always perform better on fight night than I do in the gym because I think I'm really well suited to handle that pressure and perform at my best. But the other thing about winning state that still gives me confidence, I don't really dwell on it, but I know that I can stick to a process and stick to it, and at the end, when it comes down to it, I can make it happen. So I think like the journey of training for a championship fight or for a fight is a lot like a wrestling season, right? I take 3 or 4 months and train really seriously, and I've been able to trust that process and work through that process and have success with it in the past. So I think that suits me well, knowing that I can, and then when I was in state, I took third my sophomore year. I took third my junior year, and then I finally broke through and won gold my senior year. And I think that kind of follows a similar path in my professional fighting career. I wasn't at the top right away. I kind of had to dig for it. So I think having those life experiences has paid dividends for me in my fight career a lot.
Does that come pretty natural to you when right before a match, whether it's wrestling or in the cage, where your heart is just racing, probably faster than it ever does? Is that natural for you, where you have that ability to control that and get that focus? It kind of seems like you have that right to get go.
I have so much experience doing it. I've done it so many times. I've been learning about myself. And what I need to do to operate at my best. What am I feeling like? What am I acting like? What am I thinking like in those moments that I perform my best? And I said after this fight, I feel like it's getting easier every time, and I think that's just an experience thing. And I take a lot of confidence. I've tried to get less superstitious as I get older, because I think if it can be a weakness, if you're really superstitious and your plan kind of gets thrown off, you can't let it really mess your day up too much. But I have a routine that I follow, and I just take a lot of confidence in the fact that I've done it so many times. I'm just really familiar, I guess, with myself and how to get myself in the right mindset. But I think it's getting a little bit easier every time.
I apologize for probably going to be a dumb question, but I was listening to Joe Rogan. They had a wrestler on there, and they were actually talking about what the floor was made of in those old rings, back in the 90s, the Rock and those guys. What is the floor like in a cage? Is that just plywood, or is there a little give to that floor?
It depends on how nice of a promotion you're fighting on.
Okay.
So these days I'm a little bit closer to the big leagues, so it's pretty tip-top shape, but, as you start as an amateur or a low-level pro, if you know anything about local MMA, sometimes they put a cage up in the back of a bar or something like that.
Right.
So, in that case, it's literally a piece of plywood with some wrestling mats and a canvas. And I've been to some fights where it breaks, and they gotta fix the freaking cage in between fights. So these days, that's not something I have to worry about. It's tip-top top of the line stuff, but there's some sketchy cages in some of these grassroots MMA
I would
events.
imagine.
Where it's literally you worry if you're fighting after the big boys, because those are the ones that break the cage and break the floor.
A little bit of the carnival atmosphere, I'm sure.
Oh man, I could tell some. Yeah,
I would imagine. And the other probably dumb question. So as I was watching you fight today, it's before you actually walk in, are you getting a pre-medical check right out, kind of outside the cage, or before you do your walk-in? Are they checking something?
So we do a couple different physicals throughout the week. That is not a physical, I wouldn't call it. They are putting the Vaseline on my eyebrows and the bridge of my nose and under my eyes to potentially minimize cuts with the Vaseline on. It's supposed to create a little bit of less friction and hopefully keep you from getting cut as easily. And then they check to make sure you have your mouth guard in and that you're wearing your cup. And then they send you, I guess they pat you down to make sure you're not greased up or whatever. But where the physicals happen is right before weigh-ins. I see an actual MD, and they check your heart. They check your major joints to make sure you're not about to get in there with a blown out knee or a blown out shoulder. So they do a basic sports physical the day before during weigh-ins, and then all the fighters go and see the doctor right after. The first thing you do after you leave the cage is you go see the doctor.
Okay.
So I want to ask you a question. You mentioned that you're a small business owner. You want to talk a little bit about your business and your training and kind of promote that a little bit as well?
Yes, I am. Yes, thank you. I am one of the co-owners at Team FEGC, or the Fox Valley Grappling Club would be the long form name of that. And we're on Nicolay Road, kind of over by Nakashima's and Bergstrom, over by the mall. And we offer adult Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and we do a kids Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program that I am involved in coaching a little bit. And then we have an MMA program where I coach some other up-and-coming fighters. And then right in the building with us is Aviators Wrestling, which is a youth wrestling club that I actually trained at when I was a teenager and a high schooler, and now I've been coaching here for about 10 years. But recently, so I've been with Team FEGC for almost all of my professional career since I was about 21, and now in the last couple of years, had the opportunity to move into more of an ownership role. I don't do a ton of the front office stuff right now. I'm really focused on my fighting career, but I guess where I do the most work, I teach a lot.
Good.
I'm teaching probably between 10 and 15 classes here a week. So
wow.
Most of my day is free. I do most of my training like 9 to 4. And then I teach in the evenings from about 5 to 8:30 on a pretty regular basis. I love it.
Would you say the state of youth wrestling and that is pretty strong right now? I know this is sort of a hotbed area, but is it still that way?
Yeah, I think Wisconsin, I would consider Wisconsin as a whole to be a top 10 wrestling state in the country, as far as like middle schoolers and high schoolers go. Not that I wouldn't love coaching wrestling in more of a public school setting like my dad does. I would be interested in that, but I am really, really spoiled being here. We have some really, really hardworking, amazing young people. So the parents are always like, man, we appreciate you motivating and inspiring our kids. But honestly, I take a lot of motivation and inspiration from them as well. Like they're working just as hard as I am to reach their goals. So, I want to continue to raise the bar and set a great example. And because if I was slacking off even a little bit, these 15-year-old kids would be working harder than me, and I can't, I'm not going to let that happen for a couple more years yet. So my dad always was really great at leading from the front. He would never ask you to do a workout that he wasn't willing to do himself. So I try to take a lot of that into my own coaching style. But yeah, we have some, not just like talented, successful wrestlers, but I really work with some like really great young people. So I think sometimes we fall into this loop of thinking that the next generation is dumb and lazy and entitled, but it's nice to see, there's some really exceptional kids that I get to spend a lot of time with. So I'm really lucky in that regard.
That's really cool to hear. And I've found the same thing in a lot of these sports. You're right. These kids get a bad rap. There's some hard workers out there, and these kids take it serious, and some great athletes and great kids out there for sure, girls and boys.
And they carry themselves like, like professional, like just stand up kids. So yeah, I'm lucky to be coaching where I am.
No, I believe it. And they have a great role model for sure.
So I do have a couple more questions for you. I know we're getting close to that hour. The first one is who is somebody, and you may have already answered it, and the listeners may already know, but and you look at your mentors, you look at somebody you look up to. Who are a couple of those people that you just want to shout out and say, you made a big, huge influence on my life?
Well, the easy, obvious answer would be my parents, and they both contributed in their own ways. My dad is, and not to say that my mom is not competitive or intense in her own ways, but she certainly can be. But I think my dad, pushed me really hard and made me really tough. And I think my mom, and still does, try to keep my head on straight. Like, my dad wants to push me and make me a winner, and my mom wants to make sure I don't act like an asshole while I'm doing it. So and in the MMA world, you see a lot of guys, man, kind of acting crazy, and whether that's really their personality or whether that's from wrestling and boxing to sell fights, or for me, I got no place for that. I have young people looking up to me, so I try to always carry myself as a professional, and my mom makes sure I do that. And then some other people that I really look up to are both of my brothers. I think my brother Kelly and my brother Quinn are two of the most upstanding, well-rounded men that I know. So I look up to the way that they carry themselves in their everyday life. So those are two people I look up to as well. And then as far as mentors go, today I have a coach, Nick Thompson, the one that you saw give me my black belt on Friday. That's someone that has, I always say he really changed my MMA career around. I've been, since this win streak started about 3 years ago, had the opportunity to work with him on a really regular basis. And Nick was, if you look at Nick's MMA career, he was like 40-12 as a professional MMA fighter. So he's got over 50 fights, a world champion himself, and even at 42. And now he's an interesting character. He retired from professional fighting, and now he's a lawyer. He runs his own law firm. So a pretty interesting guy in his own right. But he has given me some really valuable time of his and some really valuable advice, and that's someone I look up to. Someone who's an absolute beast, but if you saw him, outside of the cage, just in his everyday life, you would never guess that he was as successful as a fighter as he is, because he carries himself in a laid back sort of way that I appreciate.
Cool.
Are there many other professional fighters in the area?
No, not successful ones. That's a slight dig at some of my business competitors. But my honest answer would be, if I make it to the UFC, I would be the first person from Appleton to ever do that.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would say, even if I don't make it to the UFC, I probably have the most successful resume of any fighter that has ever come from the area. There's a lot of good fighters come out of Milwaukee, but once you get north of Milwaukee, there's not a ton of guys at a super high level. So it would mean a lot to me to be the first person from here to make it to the big leagues. That's my goal. My goal before I'm done is to be the first person to make it to the UFC, and then be the first person to win a fight in the UFC. So.
Right on, man. That's
more
awesome.
Boxes to check off yet. Yeah.
Heck yeah. When you first started, when you knew you were going to do the MMA, was that the path to go from Hortonville, and then you had to go to Milwaukee, basically prove yourself there and spread out from there?
Yeah, so, I've heard, and this is another thing I've heard of so many times in my career, you got to move to a big city, you got to move to a big gym, you got to do this, you got to ask this person for a favor, you got to ask this person to talk to someone for you. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this my way, and I'm going to build a great team around me. And so I'm certainly not giving myself I'm not doing this by myself in Appleton. I've been able to put some really hardworking and good people around me. And I do go to Milwaukee and cross train. I think it's important there. I go, I spend a lot of time here with my own team, and I have a coach that can kick my butt. I have some really hardworking training partners that push me. But I also got to kind of get out of my own bubble sometimes. And, it's good to go see some people that you're not super familiar with. If I train with David 6 days a week, he knows what's coming. I know what's coming. So I do make my way down to Milwaukee. There's a couple of gyms with some training partners and coaches that I trust and have been really valuable help for me as well. So
that's good. That's probably a tough world to find people to trust, isn't it? The UFC world.
So
the MMA world.
That's kind of why I like to stick to my small little team, because I know they don't want to hurt me. I know that they have the best intentions in mind. A lot of times, let's say I went to, not to like pick up, if I went to Rufus Sport would be a name that you might know in Milwaukee, where Anthony Pettis but if you go to a gym with a bunch of other professional fighters and you're not their friend, they don't care about your development or your safety. A lot of times you walk in there and you are a punching bag. You know what I mean? You are another body that they can try to beat the snot out of. And so they're not necessarily worried if they cut your forehead open or they give you a concussion or your knee gets hurt. So I try to stick to a smaller group of people that I've trained with before and that I know I can know and trust. Sure. I try to avoid the real mega gyms, big gyms, as much as I can.
That makes sense.
Not to say that they're all bad, but like if you're not my buddy, then I'm probably just someone you can try to punch in the face with your new move. So
yeah. My son wanted to ask how much those tattoos on your shins hurt.
Oh, they hurt a lot. Every time I get tattooed, I forget. I take a couple year break, so I forget how much they hurt. And then they get started. I'm like, oh yeah, this sucks. Yeah, I sweated through all of them. But I wouldn't say any of them hurt more than the other. They all hurt a lot.
Yeah, I cannot even imagine. Well, seriously, Kegan, this was awesome. Thank you so much for being on. I learned a lot, and we're going to definitely keep an eye on you and keep up on the socials and everything so we can see when your next fight is, and hopefully we can have you on again, and that'll be the time when it's that UFC call.
Yeah, we'll have some big news to talk about, hopefully.
Yeah,
that'd be so sweet.
Thank you guys for having me. I had a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys reaching out. It was a good time.
Oh, we certainly appreciate it.
I like doing stuff like this.
Well, already, Tosh, it's that time again, once again, for the Red Smith Sports Award Banquet Throwback. Tosh, this episode, I think I did that last time, this episode will go back to 2004 once again. We just had Herb Kohler. He won the Red Smith Award that year. Well, that year, we also had Sean McDonough was our featured speaker, and you've seen Sean all over your TV screen for years. He does football, he does basketball, he does it all.
Yeah.
He at the time he was a CBS Sports announcer. We had a great stretch at the Red Smith Banquet. We had 4 out of 5 years. We brought in CBS Sports announcers: Vern Lundquist, Bill McAtee, Sean McDonough, Bill Rafferty. Most of those guys we've had on the throwback already. So go check out the archives. But Yeah, Tash, Sean McDonough. He was a great one. We had fun after the banquet. I remember that, and he was good.
Went out to have some beers, but
yeah,
this is Sean McDonough is just a classic announcer. I mean, he's been doing announcing since 1982 when he was with the Syracuse Chiefs. He was the play-by-play for radio. He's done Olympics. He's currently the NHL on ESPN, NHL on ABC. He's their lead play-by-play. So if you get a chance to watch the NHL on TV at all, you can check that out. He still is the radio play-by-play for the Boston Red Sox as well.
Yeah.
So, he's a classic announcer, career announcer. He does a great job. And, he, like you said, Joe, it was a good time that night, hearing stories and just shooting the crap about sports, which is always a good time. No,
absolutely. When you have a career like that and a Boston guy like that, you're going to be filled with stories, and they came pouring out that night. In a January night, 2004, at the Radisson Paper Valley Hotel, Sean McDonough.
Red Smith Sports Awards Banquet Throwback.
The Red Smith Award, of course, goes to someone who has made some unique contributions to sport in Wisconsin and also epitomizes the great values that Red Smith exhibited.
Let's give a Red Smith welcome. Please welcome Sean McDonough.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I know you've been sitting a long time. Some of you are probably too polite to get up and leave, and if you want to do that, I want to allow you the chance to do that. And I'd like to think of this for the moment as the 7th inning stretch. We're really in the 9th inning. But the 7th inning stretch, and I'd like to ask your indulgence for just 10 seconds. If you'd all stand, let's clap. Show me some of that Fox Cities area enthusiasm that you're famous for. Cheer like you're Howard Dean, finishing third. Big standing ovation. Actually, I kind of used you guys there a little bit. I know maybe some of you wanted to stretch, but you had my good friend Vern Lundquist here last year, and he told me it was a great group, but sometimes unresponsive. I said, I'll bet you $100 I get a standing ovation when I walk right up to the podium. So now I have the picture to prove it. Jim, thank you for coming up. Actually, Vern Lundquist is still mad at me. We did the Masters together at CBS for 4 years, and our producer, Lance Barrow, is kind of famous for malaprops and not getting the name right. He's a Texan with a hard drawl to understand. He's always talking in your ear, and he's the guy to tell you which hole to throw it to and what to go to. And you remember John Van de Velde, who had that terrible misfortune at the British Open. He kept hitting the ball in the water. Hopefully something that dramatic will happen in your tournament. But he was playing in the Masters, and I was on my hole, but it was a hole that I couldn't see. When you're in the tower doing these golf tournaments, you're on one hole, but you're doing the commentary for 3 or 4 other holes, so you rely on the people to tell you. So they go to a golfer in the middle of the fairway. I don't recognize him, so I set on my talkback button into the truck to Lance Barrow. Said, "Who is that?" He said, "The Frenchman." So I'm thinking, there's several Frenchmen here at the Masters. I said, "Which one?" He said, "Jean-Claude Van Damme." So shortly after that, we had a rain delay. We all had it was the first round of the Masters. We all went into the compound for a few minutes, and Vern and I were talking about stuff like that, messing up names and embarrassing stories. And Vern told me a lot of very funny anecdotes about things that he had messed up that were embarrassing. And we go back after about an hour of thunder and lightning. We're back in our towers. They resume golf, and you probably know the golfer, Stuart Sink. Stuart Sink. He was in contention. And I was on my hole in the 16th hole, and they said, "Mayor, throw it to Vern at 14. I said, "Let's go to Vern Lundquist at 14. And the first words out of Vern's mouth after the blooper talk and after the rain delay, when I said, "Let's go to 14, he said, "Where Stuart Stink is putting for par." So he's been mad at me ever since. He blames me for putting all those blooper thoughts in his head. I want to commend you, Chuck. I know how hard it is to MC these dinners, and you've proven that tonight. And and Joe, that was a beautiful introduction. Excuse me, Judge Troy, in case I misbehave later tonight and wind up in your courtroom. But that was a beautiful introduction, but you've certainly handed down sentences that weren't that long. Let's face facts. Who else can I dump on? Who's out there? Mike Reese called me. I had heard about your banquet from Vern. I was excited when he called me. I was a little disappointed because when he started out, I thought he was engaging me in a conversation about the First Amendment. He said, do you believe in free speech? I said, I'm a journalist. Of course I believe in free speech. He said, good, come to Appleton in January because you're going to give one. So here I am, the midnight show in Appleton, in fact. It's an honor to share the dais with people I really admire. I've known Dave Collins a long time, grew up watching Dave play, obviously as a lifelong Bostonian. My parents actually had a similar experience to your mother driving. My dad passed away about a year ago and was a wonderful man and had a lot of friends who are here in the room, and I appreciate all the nice wishes, and especially from the Packers. But he was a terrible driver, and one time he and my mom were in the car, and my dad got pulled over, and he said to the officer, why'd you pull me over? He said, well, you were speeding. And my dad said, oh, I don't believe I was. It's 35 miles an hour, and I was going 34. And my mother said, no, you weren't. You were going at least 45, and I told you to slow down, and don't give the officer a hard time. So my dad kind of shot her a look, as he could do in his South Boston Irish way. And then the police officer said, I couldn't help but notice that you don't have your seatbelt on. He said, well, I did have my seatbelt on, but to get my license and registration out, I had to take it off. And my mother said, that is not true. Matter of fact, I've been telling you for 3 miles to put that seatbelt on, and you just wouldn't do it. So with that, my father turned to her and said, would you please shut up? And the officer leaned in the car and said, ma'am, does your husband always talk to you like that? And she said, only when he's been drinking. And what you said about Herb Kohler was exactly right. I mean, the lack of ego, and I think I did my part accidentally tonight to help that, because when I first got here and saw him surrounded by the TV camera, I said, wow, I can't believe he's here. And I went over and I said, Mr. Rogers, I have all your records. And I... I helped with the ego thing, you know. And I mean, it was a great speech and very interesting, but anybody who plays golf with me and my buddies knows the synergy between toilets and golf. I can assure you of that. I live in this is a golf crazy area. I read something like Wisconsin and Minnesota have the most golfers per capita and the most golf courses, and I'm not surprised. And you have a lot of great courses in the state, and none better than yours, Mr. Kohler. We commend you because it is a masterpiece, and I think it's going to be an unbelievable test of championship golf. A lot of people asked me tonight how I got started in broadcasting. A lot of you probably want to know why I got started now after this, but I was a baseball player, minor league baseball player. Appreciate what you have here. And I knew it wasn't going to last very long when they used to bring me in to pitch in relief. You know, a lot of times during the breaks they would they bring out the rakes and they drag the infield, smooth out the bumps. When I would come in from the bullpen, the ground crew would rake the warning track so that the outfielders didn't hurt themselves as they. And then I got this uncontrollable twitch in my neck that went away. So they said, you got one last chance, but you got to be a hitter because you can't pitch. And I knew that was coming to an end. I went up to bat, and you know, it's a very small crowd. And you could hear the transistor radios. I could even hear the announcer up in the booth. And I heard the announcer through the transistors. I wrote this down verbatim. As soon as McDonough makes the final out, we'll have the postgame show. So now I just play softball in South Boston with my Irish Catholic, it's a great Irish Catholic neighborhood, as you know, and an interesting softball team. We have Jimmy Fitz, Billy Fitz, Bobby Fitz, Tommy Mack, Timmy Mack, Johnny Mack, Sully. A lot of Irish guys. So I had to get out of playing and get into broadcasting. I started out doing minor league baseball, as Chuck said an hour ago, making $14 a game, and that came back to haunt me early. I got off to a bad start in broadcasting, too. I was coming out of the park one night. I felt something on my back. Stick your hands up. This is a stick up. I said, oh, come on, buddy. I'm making $14 a game. I'm just a poor announcer. And the guy said, I know. I was listening to the game tonight. I did make it onto the Red Sox later on. It was a tough year to start. 1988 I started. That was the year of the Wade Boggs, Margot Adams relationship. And a lot of tension on the Red Sox, a lot of tension. I got in trouble early. We had a pitcher named Oil Can Boyd. And he, in spring training in Winter Haven, Florida, forgot to return 3 movies to the video store. And as you can probably tell by now, maybe I'm a little bit of a smart guy. And on the air, I refer to it as the Cannes Film Festival. And so that got me in trouble. Oil Can pitched a game in Cleveland in the old ballpark before Jacobs Field. And Dave will probably remember this. He was probably in Boston when it happened. And the fog came rolling in off Erie. Just came thick as pea soup. They stopped the game for about 45 minutes. And finally, the umps came out and they hit fungos up in the air. And you couldn't see the ball. They called the game. 6-inning game, official game, 2-0 shutout for Oil Can. So we go down to interview Oil Can after the game and said, what do you think about that development? And he said, that's what happens when you build a ballpark right on the ocean. He wasn't a geography major. We had our manager, Butch Hobson. One year I told him during a little conversation before the game that I was doing a football game that weekend, he said, they keep you busy. I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I've got to go to Lillehammer, Norway, where they're having the Olympics for the World Bobsled and Luge Trials on Thanksgiving weekend in Lillehammer, Norway. And Butch looked right at me and he said, that's in Sweden, isn't it? So I knew we were in trouble with him. Our previous manager was John McNamara, who for 2 years called me Sean every day, and then I had him on a TV show, and he looked at the graphics, and he said, that's how you spell your name, S-E-A-N? I said, yeah. We came on the show, and I welcomed him, and nice to have you here, John. He said, well, seen. Very happy to be here. I knew we had no future with him. We had the always interesting Roger Clemens, who said he didn't like to be misinterpreted, or obviously not at UWGB on one of your athletic programs, or taken out of content, which I didn't understand when he said that. I asked him one time about pitching on an extra day of rest. He said he didn't like it. It made him too erotic. And that first year, I'm working with a guy named Ned Martin, who was a great broadcaster. God rest his soul. He just passed away about a year ago, too, and he should be in the Hall of Fame. But he was a little mistake-prone at the end when I was working with him. And one night, we're doing the game, and Roger Clemens is in the early part of his career, just pitching great. And Ned said, all the things I appreciate about Roger Clemens, I think the thing that I appreciate most is his work ethic. He is definitely an alcoholic. Name meant workaholic, but I'm still not sure to this day. My broadcasting idol was Harry Carey. And I know a lot of you people are Cub fans here and probably heard him say these things. He just said things that, those of us who have nowhere near his credentials or longevity wish we could say, but we couldn't. You remember the Cubs, the White Sox, actually, when he was there, had an outfield of Pat Kelly, who was notorious for having a terrible throwing arm. And they had Walt No-Neck Williams, who was center fielder with no neck. And they had Carlos May, who had his thumb blown off in Vietnam. And Harry said, you probably remember this, right now their outfield is no arm, no neck, and no thumb. I remember he used to try to do the games out in the center field bleachers, really so he could drink, I think, and get away with it. But this bud's for me, he used to say on the billboards. But he had a hard enough time following the game when he was in the booth right behind home plate. So he'd be out there in center field. I was watching the game one day, and Harry said, swing and a miss. I don't do an imitation of him, obviously, but swing and a miss. He struck him. No, it's a line drive to third, and it's caught. And then Steve Stone chimed in, and he said, no, Harry, that was strike 3, and then the catcher threw the ball down to third. Harry violated a lot of basic tenets of our business, like you don't chew or cough while you're on, or clear your throat all the time. While you're on the air, you people watched him. So finally, the guy who was engineering the radio got tired of Harry coughing on the air, and you're the engineer. That's your responsibility, the technical part. So he went to Harry. He said, "We're going to devise a system. When your microphone is on, this light bulb right in front of you is going to light up, and you just talk away. And when you want to cough or clear your throat, just raise your hand. I'll kill your microphone. That light goes off. Clear your throat. Raise your hand again. I turn your mic on. The light bulb comes on. Go." System works great for weeks. One night, Harry's doing the game. Raises his hand. The light bulb doesn't go off. Wants to cough. Raises his hand again. The light bulb doesn't go off. He turns around. The engineer's not there. So Harry unscrewed the light bulb, coughed into the microphone, and kept going. We have a lot in common, we New Englanders and you folks in this part of the country, not the least of which is the weather. And I think we've had our coldest winter in memory in Boston, and I think it's a good omen. I got an email the other day that gives us hope. It tells you what happens when the temperature gets to certain degrees. Dave was just trimming his plants. At 60 above zero, the Floridians turn on the heat. People in New England go out and plant their garden. At 50 above, Californians shiver uncontrollably. People in New England sunbathe. At 40 above, English and Italian cars won't start. People in New England drive with the windows down. At 20 above, Floridians don thermal underwear, hats, coats, and gloves. People in New England throw on a flannel shirt. At 15 above zero, New York landlords finally turn on the heat. People in New England have a cookout, the last one before it really gets cold. At 0, people in Miami die. New Englanders close the windows. At 10 below zero, Californians go to Mexico. People in New England get out their winter coats. At 25 below, Hollywood disintegrates. Girl Scouts in New England sell cookies door to door. At 40 below, Washington, D.C. runs out of hot air. People in New England let the dogs sleep inside. At 100 below, Santa Claus finally abandons the North Pole, while people in Boston get frustrated because the car won't start. At 275 below, that's when all atomic motion stops, absolute zero on the Kelvin scale. People in New England start saying, "Is it cold enough for you?" And at 500 below zero, hell freezes over. But here's the good news, folks. The Red Sox or the Brewers win the World Series. I really admire what you're doing. I think this event is incredible, the magnitude and scope of it, and most importantly, what you do with it. I don't think there's much more that we can do in our society than to do things that help the young people of our country. And I'd heard so much about the warmth and friendliness of the people in this area, and I certainly have not been disappointed. If anything, you've lived up to that expectation and beyond. So thank you so much for honoring me by allowing me to be here tonight. God bless you. Thank you, Pal. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, Newsa-Cast listeners, welcome to everybody's favorite segment, the Forgotten and Never Forgetting.
Hey, there we
It's
go.
that
Tosh.
segment where we just want to throw some things out there that we like, dislike, and kind of give it a silly name. So, Joe, what have you forgotten?
Oh, Tosh, what I want forgotten, and do I want this forgotten? It's the ice. My goodness, Tosh, this has been a brutal, brutal week. We all, it's difficult to drive. It's difficult to walk. It's difficult to live. This ice is just nuts. And look, I get it. It was the absolute worst combination. You have a blizzard following by brutal freezing and nothing we can do to get rid of this. It's just glaze ice, but dang, I've diggered twice on my bike. I've darn near diggered walking. It's just, give me some heat, Tosh. Get this ice off the road, ice off the sidewalks,
you got
off
it
the
coming.
steps. Yeah, I know it's coming.
Tomorrow already.
Can't come soon enough.
Next 2 weeks, I don't think we're supposed to have highs out of the 30s. So
I understand that the chemistry behind all this and you know why stuff doesn't melt at certain temperatures. I guess it just proves that Mother Nature always wins. But dude, how can we not have something that can penetrate when the temperature hits 0? We still can't melt ice. I just come on.
We do. It's not melting it, but it helps is using sand. But the city does not like to use sand because it's supposedly bad for their systems. Now, if you go down to Madison, they use tons of sand, and the sand is all compacted into the snow, and they have a pack of snow on most of the streets. But it wasn't as we were down there yesterday, and it wasn't as slippery because all that sand's in there, and it kind of gives it traction. But for some reason, I heard that it has something to do with our wastewater and the storm sewers and the sand getting into stuff that it's not good for their system, or it's not built for that. So they don't like to use sand here in Appleton.
So you bring up an interesting point, and I have thought about this twice, and I've thought about it extremely hard as I was on my way to the pavement on my bike at intersections. But mind you, you're absolutely right. Why? Okay, I love the environment, but why can we not put down sand at least at a few of the intersections, the major intersections, where there's a lot of traffic? It was funny, or it wasn't funny. Whatever day we had a lot of snow, I happened to be over by Appleton West, and right at 3:30, as school was being let out, you could hear sirens going everywhere because kids were just getting in accidents. They were sliding everywhere. You had no control, and it's still like that. And I don't want to harp on the city of Appleton. Those guys and girls bust
they work their butts off.
Absolutely. But come on, man, we got to throw some sand down. All right, well, it's forgotten, Tosh. At least it's forgotten in my world. My knee hasn't forgotten it yet, but I'm forgetting it. But how about you, Tosh? What's forgotten in your world?
Well, I'm just going back to the Packer game, and it's just armchair quarterback. I mean, they play great, and all these people are, you hear both sides. They're playing on borrowed money and everything else, and the house money, but you hear, we told you that Packers aren't good enough to play against San Francisco. And to be honest, just I would just like to hear some positivity once in a while. Maybe I'm just getting to that point where I'm sick of all the negative stuff. They played their butts off. They gave us another week of the season. It was fun. Now move on to next season. I mean, they have expectations to live up to now next season. So those armchair quarterbacks, those negative, I told you that blah, blah, blah. It's just getting sick of it.
Yeah, me too. It actually turns you off a little bit from sports. Maybe even the older you get, just you can only take so much armchair quarterback, and there's so much that goes into everything for sure, all these decisions. But, if you look at the positive, Jordan Love had a great year. I mean, I think you can't think anything but positive things for him. I mean, the team is young. There are a lot of positives, but if you look at history and you look at the cold, hard facts, that game was won. They should have won that game. I don't care how young they are. I don't care who they're playing. You're in the red zone 3 times and you can't score. You get a couple of field goals. You have a pick 6 in your hands. You can't. I mean, history shows us that you don't get these opportunities too often. And for whatever reason, Packers have 2 Super Bowl wins in the last 30 years or plus, but they have a hell of a lot of gut-wrenching defeats, and I would consider this one of them. Right up there with Seattle in the onside kick, right up there with a 4th and 26, right up there with the Terrell Owens 49ers, catch. I mean, the list is endless of these gut-wrenching losses by the Packers. And in my eyes, this is one of them. Unexpected that they were in this round playing, but they were a hot team that should have won that game. And unfortunately, they didn't. And, the future looks bright, but you just never know.
You can't let teams in it. You have to step on the gas, and you give a team too many chances, they're going to come back to bite you. So,
God dang, Tosh, you're getting me preaching on this segment here. I'm just fired up on some of this stuff.
There you go. All right. Well, let's get off of that. What are you never forgetting? We'll get on a happier note here.
Oh, as my phone locks up on me, Tosh, I'm never forgetting that I have a bad memory. That's for sure. But no, what I'm never forgetting, and it happened to me today. We've talked about this before, but I love doing this podcast and just the rush of doing the podcast. You and I we talked before we hit record tonight. We have a lot of exciting interviews coming up. A couple of them we're just kind of working out logistically. I think we're going to go on the road for one. I just love that hustle and that just the mind of just doing this project. It's so much fun. So I know I've used this one before, and I don't want to retread old ideas, but it hit me again today as kind of stuff was unfolding, that I just love the rush of doing this podcast. It's a lot of fun.
There you go. Very nice. Yeah, I would agree with you, Joe. It has been good. We've had some amazing stories, some very interesting people on the show. So hopefully those continue, and we keep producing some good stuff for all the listeners out there.
We definitely will. If today's any indication, we're doing all right. Some exciting things in the future. So
good.
Tosh, for you, what are you never forgetting?
Well, I said earlier that we were down in Madison yesterday for hockey, and I just tell you what, I know this is the Newsa-Cast and it's Northeast Wisconsin, but I love Madison. There's just something about Madison that's a cool vibe, college town. And we went down early. We hit Trader Joe's. We hit a really cool little brewery, had lunch. Then we went to see some games, and the boys were playing at the Hartmeyer Ice Arena, which was originally built in 1963 for actually the Badgers. They played 4 seasons at that arena. It still feels like it's 1963 in that arena, nice. But it's Madison just has a cool vibe. Even it was a beautiful day yesterday. It wasn't too windy, and it was nice and sunny. There's tons of people out on the lake ice fishing, and it's a fun city. Maybe I don't want to live there necessarily, but it's definitely a fun city to visit.
I absolutely agree. The restaurants, the bars, just everything is fun. The college certainly adds to it, but absolutely. Just the landscape of that town is really cool, isn't it? With the hills and the lakes, and just it's a biker friendly town, a walking friendly town. I love Madison. I love that part of the state, just the rolling hills. It's so absolutely. Much different than it is up here. Yeah, it definitely is. It's getting into that driftless area of the state, which is a whole nother geology lesson that I'll stay away from right now. No, absolutely. Well, Tosh, that sounds good. I'm actually going down to Madison on Friday to catch a Badger game, so nice. I'm going to get in that town as well and enjoy their sand on their intersections and not slide through them.
Oh,
so
by Friday, you should be good.
That's good. Yes, we
Definitely.
Can't wait. We can't wait. So, well, it's forgetting and I'm never forgotten, or I think I screwed it up again, but you know the point, Tosh.
It's forgotten and never forgetting, but that's okay.
Thanks, Tosh.
Thank you for listening to another great episode of the Newsa-Cast. We'd really appreciate it if you hit up our social pages, subscribe, like, follow, and don't be afraid to engage. Head over to our YouTube channel to get exclusive content like the full interviews and speeches from the past Red Smith banquets.
Thanks for listening to the Newsa-Cast. We really appreciate your support. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and tell a friend. A huge thank you to Diggstown for all the music in today's episode. Catch a gig, or find them on Spotify. Help us grow by subscribing wherever you get your pods or sharing the Newsa-Cast. Follow us on Facebook, X, TikTok, or Instagram. One of the best ways to help us grow is to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Northeastern Wisconsin Sports Advancement is a 501c3 organization. Our mission is to raise money, provide support, and bring greater awareness for youth sports organizations in Northeast Wisconsin. We do this primarily through the Red Smith Sports Award Banquet and the Newsa-Cast. Each year, we give back to the community through 3 initiatives: the Every Kid Plays Grant, the Gives Back Initiative, and scholarships to student athletes.